Thank you, Arūnas. Thank you, the participants, listeners, and speakers. Thank you for this possibility to speak in this forum. I'm going to speak about the current situation, which is not linked to the elections. As Arūnas mentioned, our geopolitical and climatic situation is difficult. A lot of changes are taking place around us, and they have a direct impact on food production, food safety, and food safety. The European Parliament of this term started its work when the war was not raging. And we focused on the impact on the adverse impact on the climate change on agriculture and food production in broader terms, as well as global migration, because people who are unable to grow food themselves, they leave certain areas. And the trademark of the current European Parliament is the Green Deal. It focuses on fighting climate change so that we could continue growing enough food. Could I share already the second slide I prepared? Could I ask to show it? Okay, I can see it. Thank you very much. So, the Green Deal led to certain tensions. Some of its elements led to certain tensions. But the Green Deal should be considered sacred. If we want to grow food, we have to respond to the climate changes that have already taken place because of extensive human activity, industry, military effects, and agricultural activities. So how can we contribute? You can see the targets of the Green Deal, which would allow managing the climate change. At the level of the European Parliament, a number of tools have been adopted with an aim to reduce CO2 emissions. And these are the toolkit of the Green Deal as to how manage the climate change. We should manage CO2 emissions in the first place. A proposal is to create a coherent and more balanced framework for meeting the US climate targets to ensure just and socially fair transition, retain and strengthen the competitiveness of the EU industry. So these targets are linked mainly to CO2 emissions. Other targets or tools are linked to land use, change of the purpose of land, and which allow to adapt when continuing food production and farming and reducing the impact on climate at the same time. Some of these measures are viewed more favorably than others, and we at the European Parliament aim to strike a balance in order not to impose bans on agricultural production, but rather prevent it from polluting and ensuring healthy food and for consumption of healthy food. Sometimes we're told that this is not the right time. The wars started not long ago. But we cannot continue this extensive food production without applying any safeguards. These are specific figures for 2030. The net greenhouse gas removal target is 310 million tons of CO2 equivalent. So these proposals at the parliament ranged from 150 up to 540 tons. So we chose the average, which would make it possible to continue farming in a sustainable manner by reducing current pollution. Another target is to reduce the overall use of chemical plant protection products, and fertilizers are included. And the discussions that are taking place and the related target is the reduction of 50%, and it is very important. However, different countries have different starting point. In Lithuania, we have reduced a lot or haven't even started to use as much of these chemicals. And in other countries, the use of pesticides is rather different. So, as you can see from the slide, the Netherlands use around 1 kilo, 10 kilos of pesticides per hectare, and in other countries only 1 kilo per hectare is used. So these differences are huge. I would like to introduce the national protection as well in order to reduce this disbalance. If we want to have healthy and safe food, we have to sacrifice something because the reductions won't work. Only reductions won't work. If you want to fight pests and want to have a good harvest, you need certain actions. There are some agricultural technologies that can help, and we also have scientific achievements. I communicate a lot with Lithuanian scientists, and they submitted proposals how new genetic technologies can be used to have more resistant seeds and more resistant plants, which would tackle the problems we face now, and we would have healthier plants and more resistant plants, plants more resistant for drought, but which provide good yield. So these new proposals by the Commission that are being deliberated upon at the European Parliament we will have a discussion at the Research Council in Vilnius this Friday about the use of new technologies in agriculture, in the Science Academy, sorry. At the European Parliament, especially Agri Committee, we discuss a lot what else we can do. And one of the things we discuss is the protein strategy, the supply of protein. In livestock farming, we lack protein as a feed, and we import vegetable protein usually from faraway countries, such as South America, where legal regulation is different. And the forests are being cut, and the transportation leads to additional pollution. So we have to tackle this issue and supply ourselves with protein in Europe. For this, we need to use new schemes that promote growing of such protein. And we need some scientific solutions as well. Next slide, please. I spoke about new genetic technologies already. In the European Parliament, we also discuss and encourage other countries to be more independent when supplying themselves with fertilizers and other resources, because the main production used to take place using Russian gas, and it's not an appropriate source now because we would increase Russia's capabilities in Russia's war against Ukraine. So we should look for other sources for producing fertilizers. And finally, the question was related to the future. The European Parliament was a long-time EU rural vision was adopted, and it is aimed at merging different measures, matching different measures. And the COVID pandemic showed that a lot of urban residents spent time in the farms of their grandparents and worked in a remote manner and stayed safe and healthy. So in this long-term rural vision, we look into the preservation of certain infrastructure. In Lithuania, we tend to close down rural hospitals and schools and to centralize everything. However, if we want to retain the viability of rural areas, we have to think about the new generations, because we need new generations to stay in rural areas and work them. I had a nice example from Lithuania. When a doctor works at her computer at home in a rural area, and she can work perfectly well when she has an internet. This is our vision, and our further proposals are related to amending legislation on the approval of new food products, about the supply of food supply chains, about the public procurement. and how to be self-sufficient in food. And I believe that it's also important, and a lot of arguments take place with environmentalists because there are many of those who don't want, who are not open to science. So we need a long-term funding strategy. We have this vision, we have very good scientists and this scientific potential. We could work together and help people who decide to stay in rural areas. Thank you very much. I think my time is up and I told everything I wanted. I will answer your questions if you have any.
Thank you very much. Mr. Olekas mentioned a very good word, questions. So this is your chance to ask questions, and we'll have him in our discussion. So think about questions. And now let's move on to our next presenter, our next speaker,